Welcome to Zaza Zooms In. I had another conversation with the beautiful Delight, actually, Darren, I call her Delight, with the beautiful Delight. And this time we spoke about boundaries. Yeah, boundaries, those things that we should all have in place, but a lot of us don't have in place. And sometimes we move them out of, so we keep moving them so that the boundaries are different. And it was just an interesting conversation. Are you supposed to have boundaries when you're in a relationship? Are boundaries okay in marriage? Where are boundaries okay and where they're not okay? How do you set up boundaries? That sort of thing. It was just an interesting conversation about what boundaries we do have. How do we let people know that we have boundaries, etc.? This is what we had to say. Hello, Delight. Welcome back to Zaza Zooms In.
Thank you for having me again.
I'm so glad you're back. Like last time we were talking, we almost went into, I think we covered quite a few topics anyway, but I stopped us as we were about to go into boundaries. So today we're going to talk about boundaries. Okay. So, I guess the question is, or the questions are, what are boundaries? Why are they necessary? And where should they be, so to speak? I'll expand on what I mean by
okay.
So what would you say a boundary is?
A boundary, I would say, is a line of how people can treat you, the expectations people should have of you or for you. But it's a personal thing. You have to set them. And you have to let people know what they are, because obviously what my boundaries are may not be your boundaries.
Yeah.
Literally,
and also, I would not know if you don't tell me.
Yeah.
So I could cross your boundaries without knowing.
And then I'll be upset and offended and everything else. But yeah, you didn't know any better. So
it's okay. So I agree with you. That's what boundaries are. Basically, they're boundaries, literally things that protect you. But I do think so. My next question was, why should we have boundaries, or should we have boundaries? I think we absolutely must have boundaries. But I think one of the points, because I think I found, certainly within the circle of some of the people I mix with, that there is a belief that there shouldn't be boundaries in marriage. Because marriage is now you've given your lives to each other. So should there be boundaries in marriage?
So what kind of boundaries? What kind of boundaries are you thinking? Because in fact, it's funny because when you say boundaries, I wasn't thinking marriage. I was thinking all the other relationships.
But you didn't think marriage?
No.
So you think there shouldn't be boundaries in marriage?
No, maybe there probably are that I haven't actually thought about as a boundary.
Well, you see, let's even just start with the basic boundary of humanity and respect. Like this. So that come on now, the boundary. There's a boundary. Your husband can't just beat you. That's a boundary. Do you understand?
Okay, see, in my head I was like, that's just a given.
That's a given.
You're right.
Now,
that's true.
If you grew up in a family where beating was the norm, maybe you wouldn't have that boundary.
Oh, that's a very good point.
Do you know what I mean? So I think a lot of people think that within marriages there should be no boundaries because you're now two become one. There shouldn't be. But I firmly believe that even within marriage there are boundaries, and the way he speaks to you or you speak to him.
Yes.
It's a boundary. Now you can't just talk anyhow. Just because I'm married to you doesn't mean that I can treat you like dirt.
Yeah.
Which I think sometimes happens in certain communities because we're now one. So you almost like. Boundaries also help you keep your identity to a certain extent. Do you know what I mean? Because if there are no boundaries, I know as Christians we say you get married to become one. But I don't think at any point in time God wanted us to lose our identity within that.
Right. So He still created us as individuals.
He should have just created us as the same person at the beginning.
Yeah.
So I think there's those boundaries. And I think sometimes those are the boundaries that, like you said, you don't even consider.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't believe they have the right to have, maybe even. So that within friendships, so I'll give you an example. There's a friend of mine, gentleman, that phones me at the other night. He phones me at 11:30 p.m. Now, I have never actually set boundaries in the sense that nobody should call me after this time.
Yeah.
But I feel like every normal human being knows that you're not calling a married woman.
Yeah, right.
As a man, you're not calling a married woman after a certain time. Unless she has asked you to.
Right, or there's an emergency, like,
So the phone rings. Now, I knew the reason he called was because he was on WhatsApp. He sent me a message earlier in the day and I responded to it. So he knew I was there live and so he calls me on WhatsApp. But I'm still thinking, you don't know where I am, what, I mean, this is 11:30 at night. So I sent you a message. I said, why are you calling me? Right? That was my message. And he was like, are you sleeping? Like as if.
I don't understand why. It's like the only reason I'm not talking to.
So I said, you can't call me at 11:30 at night. That's what I said.
Yeah.
But that was the first time that I ever told that. I'll be honest, I didn't think it was something I needed to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But clearly to him, she's awake, she's doing something, she's, we're both on there, so why can't I call her? And the reason that I did that time is because he had done it once before. And of course I picked it up because I'm like, if he's calling me at 11:30 at night, they must be an emergency.
Yes.
Why are you calling me at 11:30 at night? So I picked it up and he was like, you're awake. I mean, it was not an emergency. It was not an emergency. But I was in such shock that I didn't tell him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was so taken aback by the whole thing that I didn't put the boundary in place there. So of course he calls me the other day at that time and I immediately knew I had to put the boundary in place because clearly for him, if she's online and I'm online, then we'll put that week I will call, type of thing. So it's little things like that. Like I would have thought I wouldn't have to put that boundary in place, but clearly I had to. Now obviously the first time that he called, I didn't because
you're kind of shocked.
I didn't. I admit. But that's the thing we're saying, that if you don't put those boundaries in, so if I hadn't put it in place that day, well, I'll let you know because for who knows, he may still call next week.
I know, he may not because I remember what that meant.
But I think sometimes we are to blame because we don't tell people what our boundaries are. And I think especially within close relationships, there's a level of assumption that goes on. So we talk about marriage. There's a level of assumption that goes on. So we don't put, there's some boundaries we just don't put in place because we just kind of think, well, he would know or she would know because, I mean, he knows me or but I think it's really important to state, at least when you realize what they are, because sometimes I guess we don't even know necessarily immediately what our boundaries are.
Mm-hmm.
But when you know, it's important to state.
State it, yes.
So let's now go to something else. I've overspoken. This Delight doesn't like to speak.
She doesn't give me a chance.
Okay.
We all know, right?
I'm giving you a chance.
Okay, no, I thought you were going to give me something else to talk about.
I was going to, because, you have a young daughter, I have a young daughter. What boundaries have you told? You see, because we're doing these boundaries things all the time, and sometimes we don't refer to it as boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
But where, I'm sure you've told her, nobody must touch you here. If somebody touches you here, you must tell me. That's a boundary we're putting in place. Do you get what I mean? I mean, I know with my sons, I was so, in fact, I think my husband thought I was a bit crazy because I was so like, if a girl says no, I don't care. No means no. Don't question her, don't answer, because I don't want to.
Don't second.
You get no, remove yourself from whatever. And I'm not shouting because I think that's when my husband thought I'd lost it, because I remember when my first son he must have been 8 or 9, and his little sister, who's 3 years younger than him, was saying no about something. I don't know, don't touch my toy or do something totally irrelevant. And he was and he was going, and I went mad. I said, did you not hear her say no? No means no. You know what I mean? Because for me that was a boundary I had to establish. Boom. Oh, sorry. That was an alarm.
Alarm. They're like, stop talking.
So you know what I mean? So that was a boundary that I was very careful to put in place. In fact, I need to reinforce it with my younger one because I haven't for a long time. But with my first one, I was just like, because I just thought, you hear these things where, and girls, we can cry rape when it wasn't rape, or we can do, and the boy has nothing to stand on, especially if he's not clear on his boundary, that if the boy said no, I'm out of here or whatever. And whilst at that point, I mean, he was 80, it's not like he was with any chick, but I needed him to understand, that no means no.
Yeah.
Especially when a girl says it, but when anybody says it, but he was like, you know what I mean? I remember his father thinking I was a bit, over the top, but for me, it was just one of those boundaries that had to be ingrained.
Because we've started having that conversation now. I've had that conversation now with the boys, but gosh, I didn't think about starting it then with, like you said, innocent play or fight over toys or whatever.
Okay, so the conversation you've had has been specifically with in terms of with girls.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
yeah.
Now that they're getting older, early teens and
Yeah.
stuff. So my daughter one is an interesting one because you know how when you hear about these like molestation cases and
Yeah.
things like that, you know, unfortunately it's often with people that are known.
Yes.
And so my daughter can decide not to talk to somebody. Now culturally, as a Nigerian, somebody is talking to you, somebody is greeting you, you greet back. And I struggle internally with this because I'm like, say hello, but at the same time, she's actually she may be only 7, but she is smart and she's intuitive and she knows. And so I'm not saying these people are bad or whatever, but I'm like, I want her to learn to trust her own instinct too.
Yeah.
So it's always hard. It's like, okay, I mean, just greet, I'm here. But like, where do you start to?
Do you know, this is such an interesting one because, like,
I might have taken out the boundaries topics.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's still boundaries. But you know, it's so interesting because culturally, like you said, there's an expectation. So I stopped my kids calling uncles if we didn't have a clue, because you know we just call everybody uncle and everybody auntie, and that kind of gives them a closeness that they don't deserve necessarily. So I've now started, you know, you call him Mr. Michael.
Yeah.
You know, be respectful, but it's not Uncle Michael because it's not your uncle.
Yes.
I don't want you to think that you can behave with him how you would behave even with your uncle. That's not to say all uncles are innocent.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But at least let's try with some
No,
boundaries
that's a good point.
Because, you know, we say uncle, we say uncle. And I remember my son saying to me years ago, he said, well, everybody is my uncle. You know what I mean? And when he said it, that's when it kind of dawned that actually they're not. And you need to know the difference between the ones you can trust. And again, like I said, there's some uncles you can't trust, but at least let's start somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's that sort of thing. Now, the other thing that I have been doing, which has got me in trouble, is I've been saying to the adults, the relevant adults, that you know, he's not being rude, but I want him to be able to, you know, like what you were saying about your daughter, just like her instincts and whatnot. So sometimes I will now say, I just say to the adult, I say, please forgive him, he didn't mean it. So I would like, you know, but I won't make the child do what they're saying, because I think it is important that we teach them. We have to teach them to be polite. We have to teach them to be respectful, but we also have to teach them, like you said, to trust their instincts and to not. And you can be polite, but you see, at age 7 is still young. You know, at age 14, you can probably be polite and know how to get away if you need to, or maneuver yourself. At age 7, it's okay. I'm okay with them thinking. I know a lot of people think my children are rude. I'm okay with that because I know they're not rude.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But if that's what you think because they didn't do what your expectations were, back on expectations, didn't do what your expectations were, you know, sorry. But there's certain, you know, and there's certain. So I think it's a very interesting one, but it's a boundary. And these are boundaries that you have to. And you know, I always say this thing: teach them to be respectful, respect as human beings. But because I respect you, it doesn't mean I have to hug you.
Well, exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Greet, but you keep your physical like distance or whatever if that's what you need.
Yeah.
It's a really so like you said, don't be rude, but
it's a tough one because see, we say don't be rude, but I know that a lot of people think that I am rude. Yeah. No, that I am rude. Because, and they will probably think you are rude too, because I know how you speak to your mom and I know how I speak to my mom. Now our mothers are foreigners.
Yeah.
They're not African. So we can speak to them and it's not rude. We can answer back, we can question. Yeah. We can, you know, it's not rude.
And for them, it was encouraged. It was like we were comfortable enough that we could have that conversation.
Use your intelligence and question me. Don't just take what I say for what it is, etc., etc. Now that's not acceptable in a lot of cultures. So there was a situation I had, and I will never forget it, where I was talking to an older gentleman, and we were having a conversation, and basically he was like, "Oh, why don't you do this?" And I was like, well, I don't think, why can't we try this, you know? And he was like, oh no, they won't like that. I was like, how would you know they won't like that if you've never tried it, you know? So this is how the conversation was going. And a friend came into the room and heard the conversation, and she left. And when the conversation was over, she came back to me and she was like, please, you need to call him and apologize. So I was like, why? She said, because you were answering him back. This was the first time that I understood this, that she was really worried for me, you know, because she felt that I had been extremely rude to him because everything he said I challenged, everything. You know what I mean? Every suggestion he made, I made him defend.
Yeah,
And you know, it was a debate.
Yeah.
We were having what I thought was a conversation, a robust
Yes,
conversation,
yes.
exploring all angles. All she could see was that this older gentleman was saying stuff to you, and you were
Just
telling,
answering back.
well, yeah, you know, you're just answering him back, and you didn't take what he said as gospel,
Mhm.
and she couldn't. She was genuinely worried for me, and I thought, wow, because that for me is a bit of a problem, because if you have, this is what they call the yes people. I mean, what do they call them? When you have people around you that can't challenge you,
Oh yes.
so you can now become,
Yeah.
God knows what, you know. But that's what I mean, actually. So she thought I was rude. Now because of my conversation with her, I then called a friend and said, look, this is what happened.
Yeah.
What do you think I should do? And she said, nah, that if he thought you were rude, he would have
He
pulled
would have-
you up on it
Yes,
himself.
that's true.
But and if he didn't want to pull you up, he would have called me to tell me, because you know she was the one that actually sent me to talk to him. So she was like, he would have called me to tell you, so don't worry about it. But it really opened my eyes to something that day, because I could not be, because I had not been rude at all. But you know, when we're saying that what is good enough for you is
Yes.
not good enough for somebody
Yeah.
else. What is rude
So what
for
she
you,
thinks
you know,
is rude may not be what. No, that's
so different standards. So you know, I'm okay with people thinking that my children are rude, so long as I know that. I mean, I don't want them to think my children are rude. Don't
Right.
make it seem like you know. But if they think they're rude because they're standing up for something that the other person really has no business, then let them be rude.
Yeah.
It's okay.
No, I agree with you.
Let them be rude, because I think you know it's this boundary thing. It's like, because even with your boss, what boundaries? You know how bosses can just push. Like I remember somebody saying to me that their boss swore at them, and that's probably quite common in this culture,
Yeah.
or this, you know. But for me, that's a boundary that's
No, exactly. That's unacceptable.
What is that? That's
Yeah.
not right.
Yes.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
don't speak
But
to me like
nobody,
that.
a lot of people would just take that as that's how it is, and accept it as,
And walk
you know what I
away.
mean, and then no big deal type of thing. So I think it's very important to know. But you know, it's funny because I have some Christian friends that will say this, that in the workplace they say they don't like swearing, and so people tend not to swear around them because they know. So that's
They've already kind of set that.
their boundary. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think this boundary setting thing is, but I think it's endless, because it's in every relationship.
Yes.
It's in, you know, and then you have to, I guess, depending on the relationship as to how, I was going to say how strong the boundary is. I don't know
Yeah.
whether that's
No,
the right
exactly,
word.
because I do think they're fluid. It depends
Yes.
on who you're dealing with, and there'll be times where you'll be more flexible with things, which obviously for the other party can probably be a little bit confusing at times. But I've been working on actually, I would say, putting in some more boundaries with how, like, again, expectations people put on me. So I am a mother with 3 children, and it is go, go, go a lot of times. And then other people come in with this expectation that I should take on a lot of other things. And for the longest time I did. And then I would be exhausted, I would be resentful.
Yeah.
And especially I think the resentfulness, I was like, that's not obviously a positive thing to be. So actually learning to say, actually no.
Yeah.
And again, you feel at first you're like, I feel wrong, I feel bad for saying no, but I've got to do it because I've got to protect myself, I've got to protect the kids, I've got to protect my mental health, like whatever it is. So learning that it's okay to have boundaries in certain places. I mean, obviously, like we said, there are certain things that are always a given, but sometimes being able to be like, no, I've got to draw a line.
But you know what? The reason I smiled when you were talking is because it reminds me of the conversation we're having about good enough. Because I feel like when we know that we are good enough, when we value ourselves enough, we can say no without feeling anyhow about it. But unfortunately, we have been brought up, especially as girls, I think, to say yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Because that's what a good girl does.
Yeah.
She's accommodating, she's flexible, she bends over backwards. That's how you've kind of been brought up in society. So the moment you say no, you become stubborn, you become a nuisance, you become awkward, you become difficult.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we kind of tend to stick to the saying yes, even when it's killing us. But when we come back to this thing of good enough, and you know that, look, you know what, whether I do it or not, I'm good enough. Whether, you know what I mean, and it's you know what I mean, and so it's that thing of having to literally, I think everything stems on that, your worth and your value and knowing who you are.
I mean, it's just amazing how they all
they all because when you were saying it, I was thinking to myself, well, if you know you're good enough, you can say no and not feel anyhow about it.
Yeah.
But I agree with you 100%. I mean, because I'm just like you. it took a long time for me to learn to say no. And unfortunately, for both of us, I mean, I don't know if this is true for everybody, but for both of us, we have the capacity. So we can do and do and do and do and do. So if you almost feel like bad for saying no because you could do it.
You could do it.
Yeah, it
It may stretch you.
Exactly. But
Put you over the edge.
Yeah, not saying, but you can
You'll
do
get
it,
it done
so,
or whatever. Yeah.
And one of the things I always say to my children is, if you can be kind, if you can help, then do.
Yeah.
But I now in this conversation have to go back and address that to say, yes, you know, obviously if you can be kind, if you can help, but don't help to the point of, because you know that thing where they say, where
to
it's
the
a
detriment of
yourself.
yes.
That thing where they say put on your, they say on the airplane, put on
your mask first before helping
you can help someone else. And I think sometimes we don't do that because we can help. We have the capacity to help.
Yeah.
There's no reason really why we shouldn't help. And we haven't valued ourselves enough to know that we are reason enough why we shouldn't help.
Thank you.
Please.
That's
you know what I mean? And I think
that
so it's all the way back to values.
Yes.
So yes. So what have you got from today? You go first.
We are worthy. Boundaries are necessary. Set them up and respect them. Respect other people's and expect them to respect yours.
And let them know what yours are.
Yes.
Let them know. I mean, I know you said set them up, but some people might not think that. I know. Let people know what your boundaries
Clearly.
are. And you know, using that example of that gentleman, as soon as you need to, let them know.
Yeah.
Because the longer you leave it, the harder it is.
It's an awkward conversation first of all. Then they think is it actually serious? So nip it in the bud from the get-go.
Exactly, and then you need to.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And teach your children boundaries, age-appropriate boundaries, as you know.
Yeah. As when they reach that age group.
So that it's not a thingy.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Delight. I enjoyed that conversation.
Me too.
So what are we going to talk about next time?
Oh.
I don't know either. But anyway,
I don't know.
We'll
come up with something fantastic.
Well, there you have it. So we think that boundaries are crucial in every relationship. Obviously, boundaries are different, and for each relationship, they're different. But I think one of the most crucial things that we came out with here is that you have to set the boundaries and you have to let people know that the boundaries exist. Because if they don't know that they exist, they're going to push them down. They're just going to walk across them. Even when they do know that they exist, there are some people that are going to try and walk across them. So if they don't know that they exist, then what hope do we have? They're literally going to walk across the boundaries and we're going to suffer for it. We need boundaries. It's like protection. Protection for ourselves, protection for our hearts, protection for our physical being, protections for our spirit. We just need boundaries. We have to have boundaries of all types to protect ourselves. So, do you have any boundaries? Are there any boundaries that you should have that you don't have? I don't know. Maybe you want to have a look at your boundaries. Let us know what you think. God bless you.